Okay, so take two. There's just like a weird thing that happens sometimes with kind of like the microphone where it just isn't working. I don't know how to predict when it is. So usually I'm just looking at the little bar. There's a little bar on the bottom of the screen here. Okay, enough about that today for our reading. We're going cover to cover. We're on page 262 in the Parinama Method. And just a reminder that the reason for doing these readings is it's a companion to the book. And if you don't have the book, it also, you can, it's almost maybe like a director's cut audio edition with like too much director's cut. But for folks who have found the book to be I think it's been pretty universal that the book kind of creates this shock and awe, and that for many people, the first chapter is kind of like creates enough overwhelm that it kind of, it's a stopping point, at least in the short term, maybe some folks for the long term. But the idea here is to provide page by page support for folks that are reading this. And I mean, even as I'm reading it, I will say that I have the experience of being kind of blown away. And I think if I were doing this alone, I think even for me, it helps to feel like you're here while I'm reading it because I'm also doing my process as I'm reading this aloud. So what I'm doing, which is also wound up becoming sort of a surprise thing for me, was it turns out that this year was going to be a year of me actually doing this book start to finish. So as I've been doing it, I've been doing this practice, this like very sort of expansive holistic practice, to really learn what it's like. I mean, that's been something as far as as far as like my process of when I first started teaching this, I was really, I think like, oh my God, how much I didn't know. And so writing the book was originally like part of that discovery. And now this is the next level of it. So it's almost like this is like 3.0, which is like it's just becoming, like I didn't realize I'm just kind of like following the kite, so to speak, as it sort of pulls and doing its bidding. So I want to talk a little bit before I get into assumptions and spiritual bypassing for holding patterns. And next, probably not today, we'll talk about the shadow of the hub, which is absolute certainty, which is, goes back to the theme of rigid beliefs that really like crowd out anything that conflicts with an initial or a, set belief system. So being stuck in a belief system versus being able to remain like really like fluid in the fact that with parallax, with nuance, with change, that even the things that we hold strongly change contextually relative to the rest of our lives because our lives are changing. So our perspectives change. So if we hold on with certainty, it really blocks us from new possibilities in many ways. But anyway, going back to what we're reading about today, and I'm going to talk about my practice here in this hub. I've talked a little bit about it in the previous readings, but one thing I want to say is this hub I've always found the hardest. It's the one that I like the least. And it's funny because I'm like kind of like smart in air quotes. So it'd be like, oh, don't you like being in the like smarts information? I actually don't. I'm not really it's like when I wrote this book, I read 300 books, and you know, just a lot of like scientific literature, a lot of interviews, and now I consume nothing. Well, nothing that's like substantive. So like the thing I want to kind of talk about in terms of a practice in this hub, and this is why I have a hard time with it, is that to actually get into the inquiry state of being able to be just receptive and expansive. This is silent, still, expansive, wonder, awe. These are none of these terms really imply focusing on anything. It's actually just kind of like like this quality of like almost like a kind of like a funnel, like just blossoming into foreverness. Like it's I can't let's see, I'm just trying to it's like the difference between like looking at something versus like looking at every taking it all in. Looking at something, taking it all in, and receiving. So I personally, I'm just like, this is a hub that its nature is really antithetical to things that provide me a lot of comfort. Um, the lower hubs in a sense, like, and even the third hub. So this is like not a doing hub. It's a passive. This is surrender. It's passive. This is not a hub of like, actually, it's probably kind of an important distinction is that this is really about like an active surrender because I'm not finding it to be something I can do passively. I have to actively stay engaged with this, like not moving into the adaptation of focus, not moving into the adaptation of fixations and trying to ground myself. So it's kind of like, it's not even, I wouldn't even call it an adaptation. I'd call it like a proclivity or whatever, like a tendency. And being able to just like be. So it's challenging. It's challenging. It's challenging. I think it's really uncomfortable. And combined with a lot of the other things I'm doing with and utilizing this hub to do it, I will, which I won't go into detail on. I just want to say that it's like it really has to do with receptivity. Like it really is. It's receptivity, it's surrender. It's a lot of like terms that are like kind of divine, like divinely inspired in terms of like at least grace. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, and it's hard. It's actually interesting. Like one of the things I'm finding really uncomfortable about it is that part of my practice, which I actually wouldn't necessarily recommend for somebody on a first pass with this, is to just have nothing. Like that's not, that would be like really egregious for me to say I have nothing. Is to like really let go and accept just accept kind of this sort of disintegration in this very particular way. And so what I'm doing is I'm creating space for something entirely new. So the things that like the things I've held on to, it's like letting those fall away and it creates more space. Well, it's like stuff like clearing out clutter, but it's clearing out a lot of different kinds of clutter. And it just creates more space, more space, more space, more space. And it's kind of like if you think of like the anxiety of being like, what if you're, like I think of like an anxiety, like a young person's anxiety of being like in space and you're like in your little spacesuit attached to with the umbilical cord to the spaceship. And all of a sudden it's like you're detached and you're just floating out there. Like that feeling of being a satellite out in space. Like that feeling. So yeah. And like that aspect of anxiety. And there is a counter to that. I will say, but I'm not going to speak to it. I'm just going to leave it as like an acknowledgement of the fact that this hub is like has a very particular difficulty to it, to really get into it, to really like steep in it, and to really to be attempting to access its off like it like I'll say its offerings. that the barrier of it is antithetical to like barriers for people, such as myself, who are used to knocking down barriers and, achieving things and breaking down this and that and the other thing. Like this is this barrier that is like the barrier of that as an identity, of a person who does as an identity, as like any of the identities. It's a barrier of that. Oof. Yeah. Anyway, if you haven't given up on this section listening by now, like you're really in a rarefied space. But anyway, so I'm gonna start reading this. Yeah. I mean, is this the point where I tell you I like sat in a tree yesterday? I climbed up into a tree and just sat in it. Yes, because it just happened, and sat and looked at the Charles River as I listened to these like frequency sounds, trying to like, yeah, I did that. Okay, so holding patterns, assumptions, assumptions. Okay, so yeah, just a reminder, we're talking about the things that are like these kind of like that impact the capacity and the strength, the capability, and the dynamism within a given hub. So assumptions are antithetical to inquiry. When we assume things about people, we don't ask questions because we believe we already know. Processing new and oh God, yeah. Okay, yeah. Processing new information requires work and energy expenditure. So reflexively, we tend to do as little of it as possible. When we're not continuously curious about the people in our lives, we cut ourselves off from their growth and evolution, which has an erosive quality on relationships over time. If we expect others to stay the same, they may feel restricted within this limited perspective. Interesting where that went. I did not see that coming, even though I wrote this book apparently. But yeah, I mean, that's the part for me, is that like part of the thing about new things is the like making space by clearing out old ones. And so, God, I look really tired. I wonder why that is. I think it's because my eyes are sad right now. But the but the thing is, it's like it really is about that, like making new space. And part of the thing with like, as the paradigm of tangle is concerned, is that the formation of reflexes, the adaptations as a result of early experiences and circumstances, that the beliefs that we hold around them, it's kind of like the idea that you can hold a belief that something isn't possible and then still do it. Like it just doesn't work that way. And this is one of the things, it's like those beliefs can be really comforting. The belief that like, look, I'm just a this, or like, this is just how it is. You can't da 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 da. And it's like holding on to that like a security blanket. And it's like, I really get it. I'm not saying this as a point of condescension. I'm saying that like certain people, like it's like certain people that like continue to like indoctrinate us with their projections and worldviews. Even certain things like even using social media, I mean, one of the things about Facebook recently is I'm like, this is how people from like my past, I haven't even really friended many people on Facebook in the last 10 years. So it's kind of like an interesting space to spend time in. It's just like the past, so, just and people, there are people that it's like, that it's like the belief that it's really important that they stay in our life, like professional and certain friends and even some family members, where it's like they're really committed to an idea of who we are that's like bad for us. So it's kind of like, all right, well, it's like, how are you going to co-sign on that, or Are you like not going to co-sign on it and then let the chips fall where they may? Because some relationships really carry with them the contingency of relating to other people. And this is another thing. And this is actually, I'll tell you, it becomes increasingly difficult because, and this goes back to why the lower hubs are really important for the establishment of self, is that there are people that just their belief about how the world works is so limited, and the only way to connect with them is to kind of like talk about that. And a lot of, it's like pretty, at least in my experience, it's really common. People are really like into like these kind of like trapped in these like notions of their own limitation, of their own like negative natures of things, and this kind of like commitment to it. And the commitment is its comfort. It's the comfort of its familiarity. So processing new information requires work and energy expenditure. So yeah, there's a lot. I mean, the assumptions, like this could be a whole day's long discussion. Maybe my scraggly hair, make it look a little more. So yeah, so I'm going to leave it there. That's like more. So I'm just going to leave it there. So spiritual, in the next section is spiritual bypassing and denial. So, it's funny, when I was writing the card for this, the little thumbnail for the video, I was remembering how my editor was like, I don't like, what kept reinforcing the need to really define what that is, because she's like, this just isn't a known thing. And realizing that defining what it is was something that I was like, yeah, this assumption about what it means and my understanding of it, but I can't explain what it is, which is sort of meta. And then then I worked on it and got there. But anyway, so let's go. So recall my discussion on spiritual bypassing in chapter 9. It's the tendency to use spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep or avoid unresolved emotional issues, unhealed trauma, and unfinished developmental tasks. If we are spiritual beings having a human experience, don't you think we should learn from our physical embodiment? The transcendence in the seventh hub isn't a denial of the other hubs. It should be a dynamic, integrative acceptance that is rich with nuance and incorporates all aspects of ourselves. Yeah. Yeah. Transformation is a process and requires effort and the ability to handle both dark and light subject matter. Excessive positive thinking is a form of denial that avoids the hard work. Think of Dabrowski's theory of positive disintegration. Breakdown leads to the breakthrough. See chapter 1. Yeah, I reread the first pages of chapter 1. Highly recommend. Highly recommend. Highly recommend it. Yeah. Spiritual bypassing is avoidance and turns transformation into a consumer product, along with the expectation that deep work feels good all the time. This puts students in the position of deciding what they will buy, with the unspoken threat that they will stop buying when the process becomes too challenging or unpalatable. Just looking at the pretty things of life and focusing on positivity is regressive and a resignation from the resignation from the work of humanization. It can lead to the most privileged folks turning their backs on those who suffer. So again, just looking at the pretty things of life, focusing on positivity is regressive and a resignation from the work of humanization. It can lead to the most privileged folks turning their backs on those who suffer. So when spirituality is like co-opted by consumerism, this thing happens, which is I've experienced directly and been a practitioner of, which is buying things and feeling like my reasons for buying them are more elevated because they're tied to so-called spiritual practices. And, I mean, so a place I really want to point to here is that a lot of the emptiness, like a lot of the like what's missing part that's trying to be reclaimed through a lot of these practices that I've certainly like been like 10 toes down on, like really, really hyper invested in, as in like spending decades um in, is the idea that like is really like a hope that it's kind of just like, hey, you just need to think about this a little bit differently, or that, like you can be like sort of have like a lot of like conventional trappings, like I just have to be nicer about stuff, it'll make me softer, sweeter, this or that, or this, or prettier, more desirable, more, more worth as a result, more worthy, that'll solve like any kind of worth is being, more flexible or pretty or looking fresher, beautifuler, but the thing is, and I'll speak very directly to my own experience, which is that the parts that were unexamined, and left unexamined by these practices were the things that relate to this, which is like look away. No, it's actually toning a nervous system to be able to be capable of being in difficult situations without becoming fully absorbed by them and overwhelmed by them. So the capacity of our second hub and our emotions is an incredibly important part of our ascension, and for solving that like something's missing emptiness, sort of like, ennui sort of sense of like whatever, it's like, what, like what's this thing that's missing, and like, and so it's like to feel more fully alive. And the idea that's like you just look at pretty things and you like focus on the positive, well, it kind of need to be able to do both. Like the aperture expands in both directions at the same time. Like there just isn't a thing where it's like I'm like great at having lots of positive emotions, and then the negative emotions, like that's an illusion of an expansion of being able to feel positive things. It's being able to play act positive things more expansively, but to really feel the depth of beauty, to be able to feel the depth of love, to be able to feel the depths of compassion and connection. It also carries with it this heartbreak, because to love is to lose. To love is to risk loss, rather. And so grief and the notion of separation is something that the more that we love something and feel it and enjoy it, the more we're facing its like impermanence. So in order to be able to handle the richness and the incredibleness of things, we also need to be able to hold the space to be able to have challenging, difficult emotions and feelings. And in doing that, being able to be in them and not feel like our very being is absorbed and drained into them. That there's this ability to be able to have an experience, to hold space for somebody, to be able to watch difficult things happen and not look away because we're just like exhausted by like a small, sort of exposure to something. So there's that. And then the point of humanization. And this is in the fourth hub. So there's the thing, like, the fourth chakra, the green, the heart, the breathing, the love, a lot of that is associated, typically, at least how I've learned, or I'd been taught previously, was really about like a romantic love, like a partner. That would, like, that opening was like this ability to love was really going to be fully, like the expression of that was in an intimate partner, which is not entirely untrue. Like, but also it's not untrue, but there's also the deeper elements of like who is showing up into that partnership, like to your own like ability to love yourself, and like that capacity, and how that's going to actually increase what's possible with another person. The idea that another person's going to solve for a lack of worth and self-love versus the inside job of growing our own capacity to like feel the love for ourselves. Because it's like having somebody love you, it feels like almost like unbelievable unless you actually have the feeling of like adoration for yourself. So this notion of kind of like, like self-love, it's almost like the love actually like originates from something deeper. It just is. There's just this is of us that is like seeing ourselves as like really just absolutely adorable. And I mean adorable in the form of in the meaning of like worthy of adoration. To see the things in yourself that somebody else might point out to you and go, I love how you do that, and that you love that about yourself. You love like, but just that you love your like being you, feeling you, walking around, getting to be yourself, getting to look in the mirror, and that's home for now. So that love is is connected with this aperture that's related to humanizing other people. So, and for whatever reason, I don't feel a lot of like juice for talking about this in depth right now, which seems wild, but the idea that to look at any other human being, to consider any other human being as being like a non-player character, this notion now that's arising that's like there are people that are like sort of like not really there. They're like drones in a sense. Even if that's true, even if that were true, the idea that you get to decide who they are really versus just like, yeah, I mean, it's a really, I will say there's such a high level of dissociation right now with people. It's like when I'm walking around in public, like in Boston, people just like walk into like walked into me, and it's like they're just oblivious, and you can see it in their faces. It doesn't even register that they walked into someone. But that's like that's not like the evidence that there's no soul in there. People are just really struggling. People are really struggling. So the idea, like the more you can see the humanity in people, the more you can see it, you feel like it grows in yourself. Like you look in the eyes of the cashier, not forever, but you just like clock them. You actually like clock their humanity. You like see people. You connect to other human beings as basically being this like this very similar experience to your own. And also the idea that human rights are human rights, because you take yourself off this really terrifying spectrum that there's merit involved in humanity and like deserving rights, the right to like have your physical needs yet, the right to have your feelings be like valid, how you feel about something be respected, at least, maybe not completely honored, but at least respected, for your personal power, for you to have autonomy over your life, to not be controlled, to be able to love in a way that is expressive and full for you. These rights not being this like kind of odd thing that's happened, that they've become like believed to be like you have to earn that, and how that separates us from our own birthright in terms of what that loaded term, our own humanity. That, and because the thing is, as long as we believe other people have to earn it, on some level there is a contamination within ourselves about the fear that's related to losing that, and the judgment associated with it, and even like the fear or the shame or whatever So it's the more that we can like really start to humanize the people in the world around us, like our capacity for love grows in your own life, just with the other people in your life. And this back to this emotional thing. It's just the sadness of being able to see suffering and see that people hurt, to just not turn away from it, to be able to like be at least witness to it, like opens up this whole capacity. Like it's opening up just more access to all of this, the feeling, the experience of being a human being. Which I understand, like with that explanation, it might feel like the immediate prompt to turn away. But what what I would say in terms of a full circle is that like we don't have forever. We have like this kind of acute amount of time to have these experiences. And, just like there are people that, die, hoarders that die with homes just stacked to the ceilings with garbage, it's like that's possible. It's a possible thing that happens, is these old adaptations it's just this feeling that's like, well, it's some level, it's like someday I will. It's like now's the time. They don't get softer by just like looking away from them, by letting them continue to operate. They just keep collecting more momentum. So the sooner we start looking at these aspects of ourselves and we start softening them, we start like expanding our capacity, just things become possible in terms of what it feels like to be alive. I mean, I work with people, and one of the things that is just like I'm meeting people where they are, but it's just really, like really universal, is the belief that it's like, this is just the way it is. Like, it's just like, this is it. This is how it is. And it's like, yeah, that's a filter. It's a lens. The world's being perceived through. So that's it for today. Next time is absolute certainty. And then we're going to get into techniques and exercises, which I think will be pretty fun. And, and quite frankly, this marks like this is like the last sort of like straight up philosophy aspect of it, where it's like contemplation for like quite a while, because we're going to do techniques and exercises. And then chapter 11 is like all applied. So chapter 11 when we start part 3 is when we start integrating all of the hubs together and doing the practices. And that's gonna be great, because it's like it's kind of nice, even in terms of like how this book works, is to like get out of like to do a counterweight, I guess, to this like really expansive-y sort of the stage, and getting into like actually starting to like execute and embody and get where we're really working towards the practice of making things, conscious creation, where we come back in through this and bring something to the earth. And this involves figuring out what it is. You might not, you can start with nothing except the desire to create something, and use this methodology and create all manner of things. Yeah, from love to money to businesses to books to whatever's in kind of aching to be actualized in you. So anyhow, that is it for me. Again, thank you for watching. It means a lot. And I answer any comments. So I respond to any comments. And for folks who've not wanted to put anything in a public comment, you can direct, and don't have my personal contact information, you can direct message me on the Parinama Method on Instagram. Okay, bye for now.